Welcome to audiobook from Non-Ha Book Review. The fiction sword play Wuxia novel traveled to another world to become a Buddhist nun at Mount Emei-Book 2. Voiced by Ava from Clipchamp. Written by author Dai Pham. The one man was bitten so painfully, he screamed and said, "You damn filthy bastard." Then he kicked hard. The zombie man chewed and reached out to grab the man's leg, pulling him down, then pounced, pressed down, and continued to bite the man's finger. The man was in pain, screaming even more, and the child was in pain. He escaped, climbed onto the bicycle, and pedaled away. The other men were slower to act. Before they could pull the beggar away, they saw a strange scene, as if this was a carnivorous beast. They were a little worried, but still helped the bitten man, capturing this filthy man. The filthy man was grabbed by the head, then his hands were held tightly and pressed to the ground. Although the filthy zombie man was controlled, a few people were also bitten. The dirty man had blood all over his mouth, growling like a wild animal, with pieces of flesh from other bitten people. Someone called the police. The men who had been bitten quickly covered their wounds, using their shirts to stop the bleeding, and hurriedly hailed a taxi, rushing to the hospital, abandoning all plans for the day. A short while later, the police arrived and shoved the vagrant into their car. The beggar still tried to lunge at them, repeatedly attempting to bite, forcing one of the officers to use a coat to cover the vagrant's head. Elsewhere in the city, at a sidewalk cafe, people were chatting and sipping their coffee. At that moment, a plump woman appeared, moving sluggishly. Her body was marked with patches of decaying skin, reeking of the foul stench of the sewers. As the filthy, sewer-smelling woman dragged herself closer, the cafe patrons paused their conversation to observe her. One of them waved dismissively and said, "Where did this beggar come from? Get lost." The bloated woman continued her slow approach until, with a sudden burst of unnatural strength, she lunged forward, knocking over tables and a few people. Then she grabbed one of the customers and pinned them down. The fat zombie lady started biting right at the neck. The customer was suddenly grabbed quickly, bitten into the esophagus, unable to say anything as blood flowed too much, eyes blurred. Others saw the strange action, dodged to the side, some ran away quickly. Another person pressed the phone to call the police. The waiter ran out and saw the unbearable scene of a customer being bitten by the fat lady, the bitten man lying motionless. The waiter didn't know what to do, froze for a moment, then ran to where the fat lady was biting and chewing the customer's flesh. He tried to push the fat lady away, to check on the customer. After chewing a few bites, the fat zombie lady was suddenly pushed away. Her body was originally big and heavy, so she couldn't move much. The fat zombie lady waved her hand to pull the waiter. After grabbing his shirt, she continued to push the waiter to fall onto the customer's body. Then she pressed down and started biting the waiter's shoulder. The waiter, due to a moment of carelessness, only cared about the customer and forgot about the fat zombie lady. After being pushed, then was bitten painfully on the shoulder. He screamed, causing the other staff to rush out and see what was happening. The people standing there, observing the entire situation, did nothing. They simply stared blankly. After a while, the fat woman was subdued, pinned to the ground. By then, the police had arrived as well. She was handcuffed and taken to the police station. The woman, acting strangely, continued to strain her neck, trying to bite. She too had a coat thrown over her head and was shoved into the car. The police officer wrinkled his nose at the foul stench coming from her, but still forced her into the vehicle. Then they inspected the body. A black body bag was brought out, and the man's corpse was placed inside. The crime scene was preserved for further investigation and evidence collection. The waiter who had been bitten received basic first aid and was given the rest of the day. The cafe had to close for the rest of the day due to the incident. The waiter went on the subway home, a wound on his shoulder oozing a little blood, pain. The subway moved swiftly, and within just an hour, it arrived at the station. He stepped off, walked through a few streets, feeling slightly dizzy. He decided against going to the hospital for a checkup since the bite seemed minor. Instead, he planned to take some painkillers and head straight to bed. Leaning against the wall, he suddenly collapsed, hitting his face on the ground and losing consciousness right there. People passing by noticed but didn't bother to check. Afraid of getting trouble, no one cared enough to intervene. Back to the boy who had been bitten, he pedaled frantically towards home. As he rode, he started feeling dizzy, his vision darkening. Unable to control the handlebars, his bike veered straight into a large bush by the roadside. He collapsed inside the bush, the rear wheel of his bicycle sticking out. A few pedestrians walked by, and cars drove past. Some people noticed the bike's tail peeking out of the bush, but after a quick glance, they continued on their way without stopping. Meanwhile, the woman who had been eating sushi earlier, along with the woman who was bitten in the park, both staggered through the park. The morning was lively with people strolling about, many of whom noticed the two women. Their pale, slightly greenish-blue skin revealed faint blue veins underneath. They didn't pay much attention, then one person then another was bitten by two zombie women. Other pedestrians also saw it, but they didn't care and continued walking. After a while, when many people saw the zombie woman biting many people, they called the police. The police received the call and quickly arrived on the scene. Within just 2 days, chaotic attacks like these were happening repeatedly. Dirty beggars were continuously being thrown into jail cells by the police. These filthy individuals would growl and slam their bodies against the iron bars. The police couldn't get a word out of them, only hearing those unsettling growls. Soon, the cells were completely full, and hospitals were overwhelmed with patients who had been bitten, requiring bandaging and wound care. The workload for medical staff was increasing rapidly. What no one knew was that these were the first days of a spreading epidemic. The doctors, unaware of the true danger, only prescribed some painkillers, antibiotics, and disinfectants for the bite victims, standard procedures for such cases. However, a few hours after returning home, the bitten individuals developed fevers and soon after, transformed into bloodthirsty creatures. They turned on their own family members, attacking them with insatiable hunger, bite, chew meat. And so, the infection spread, with the number of infected people growing steadily. At this point, the police force and city authorities began to take notice of the strange, chaotic incidents. They dispatched patrols, ordering officers to arrest all the filthy beggars responsible. However, some police officers, not being cautious enough, were bitten and scratched, leaving their skin torn open. Reports of attacks on living people continued to flood in, documenting the growing crisis. The situation was escalated to the city's high-ranking officials, but no clear directives were issued yet. Uncertainty hung in the air as the chaos unfolded. A police station. After that day's shift in the evening before getting off work, the policeman was bitten and his skin was torn, and he also started to feel a little dizzy. Then he went to the toilet to wash his face to wake up, then suddenly fainted in there. The number of people bitten in the small alleys was increasing. The police force was not enough. They could not take care of all those alleys. They only focused on arresting beggars on the main roads and streets. They forgot the alleys. The residential areas began to show early signs of the zombie outbreak. On a cargo ship, a male zombie had somehow made its way aboard. The ship, carrying both cargo and the zombie, followed its maritime route towards North Cay. Upon arrival, the goods and the zombies were offloaded, docking in the exclusive country of North Cay. On the AC border, some zombies had started to appear, wandering aimlessly and observing vehicles moving in both directions. Gradually, they crossed into sea, with some zombies trudging along the banks of large rivers, making their way further into sea. Crows perched on the zombies, pecking at their decaying flesh. The crows then defecated, spreading the virus into the water sources and onto the fruits and vegetables in nearby areas. The ancient zombie virus is easily killed at temperatures of 100 degrees Celsius. Thorough cooking can destroy it. However, many people were unaware of this. They consumed raw vegetables and inadequately washed fruits, leading to widely infected and the spread of the disease. As time passed, the outbreak intensified. Quarantine measures were implemented but proved ineffective because the mode of transmission was not fully understood. Authorities only consider those bitten as infected, neglecting the contamination of water and food sources. Despite isolating infected individuals, the number of cases continued to rise, and the outbreak spread to neighboring countries. Border C, North K border. 20-37 years. As the border guards were on duty, they spotted several heads emerging from the riverbank in the distance. They shouted in the local language, warning those attempting to cross the border to stop their intrusion immediately or face gunfire. Despite issuing several warnings, they received no response from the intruders, who continued to advance, albeit slowly. The guard teams reported to their superiors and then fired warning shots. Then they opened fire on this group of zombies. Strangely, when they fired on this group of people, they did not see any fear or running away, but this group continued to advance, sweeping through the fence, passing through the minefield. Some people were blown up, but there was no discouragement at all. They are concerned. A group of soldiers armed with batons and military sticks lined up in front of the border defenses, waiting for the approaching zombies to get close enough for close-quarters combat to prevent them from entering the country without permission. After waiting for a while, they finally saw a few of the zombies shuffling slowly toward them. The soldiers, holding their military sticks, waited for the zombies to get nearer. When a few zombies approached, the soldiers attacked them fiercely. Despite noticing some unusual signs in the zombies, they continued their assault without hesitation. Strangely, the zombies did not scream in pain or make any cries like ordinary humans. The soldiers felt a twinge of doubt and suspicion, but they pressed on with their attacks, growing increasingly fatigued as more and more zombies continued to advance. The zombies that had been beaten eventually rose and charged at the soldiers, biting them. The soldiers' uniforms, though reasonably durable, partially protected them from the bites, but areas not covered by clothing were still injured. The bitten soldiers felt intense pain but pushed back and continued to fight with their bare hands. Their combative nature intensified, and they were stimulated and exhilarated as if it were a day of exhilarating physical exercise. The scratches and minor wounds on the soldiers, combined with the virus-laden fluids from the zombies, went unnoticed. They did not realize they had been infected. The battle continued with the border forces being constantly reinforced to hold the line. Although initially enthusiastic, the soldiers grew exhausted after fighting from morning until night, even as new reinforcements arrived. Some soldiers saw their comrades being dragged down and having their clothes torn apart, causing them to feel a shiver of fear, yet they dared not abandon their positions without orders. The soldiers' uniforms, though exceptionally resilient, could not withstand the continuous tearing and biting from the zombies and eventually became shredded. When their clothes were torn, their bodies were easily bitten. Gradually, the border guards were defeated when the zombies flooded in too much. Those who were bitten then became dizzy and fainted, making the blocking force insufficient to resist the invasion and border crossing. The commander called to inform the higher command about the incident, waiting for more soldiers to arrive. A few hours later, other border guards arrived, but the border was now a mess of corpses and blood, scattered with crowds of zombies. The zombies rushed in, biting and eating more and more aggressively, spreading out, scattering to villages near the border, entering and continuing to bite and infect the villagers. The newly arrived soldiers did not know that they were zombies, so they still opened fire on these zombies according to their superiors' orders. However, it had no obvious effect. When they saw the newly arrived soldiers, the zombies became more insane, focusing their attention on the newly arrived soldiers, forgetting the corpses they were eating to attack these newly arrived soldiers. A man was leaning against a car, smoking, admiring the scenery on a deserted road near the border, when a zombie approached, then pounced on the man smoking, biting him. Bite once on the hand, tearing a piece. The man was startled, So much pain, he pushed the zombie away, then climbed into the car and drove to the nearby village infirmary to treat the wound, not caring or looking back at the zombie man who had just bitten him. In normal circumstances, if someone attacked him, he would attack back, but this man was startled. His hand was also injured, so he forgot to teach the person who attacked him a lesson. After biting the smoking man, the zombie went to another house. A villager, it followed the noise, found the house, jumped and pushed the woman who was busy washing dishes. Pushed down, then bitten by the zombie on the back of the head, the back of the neck. The pain was so great that the woman screamed in shock and fear. The other people in the house ran out to see. Then they took a stick and hit the zombie. They hit it hard, but it didn't feel any pain and continued to bite and tear the woman. Blood flowed all over the yard. The woman's relatives were in pain in her mind, trying to hit harder, but it didn't work. One of them rushed forward to pull the zombie out. When pulling it out, the zombie suddenly turned around and bit on hand. In pain, losing a piece of flesh, the woman's family went crazy, rushed in and beat the zombie, beating it more and more vigorously, but the zombie didn't budge and instead grabbed her hand, pulled it, and bit it again. They didn't know that it was a zombie that infected them with the zombie virus. Another person in the house ran out to pull the woman who was lying there, help the bitten woman up to check. They discovered that the wound was too severe. The woman had stopped breathing for a long time. They shouted loudly, tried to save her, but didn't see any movement from the woman. Their eyes were filled with anger as they turned to the zombie. The whole family rushed in and beat the zombie up. After that, they restrained and tied the zombie up, called to inform the village police. The North K border also has a similar situation, from small groups of infections spreading then gradually increasing larger. The villages are hungry, so their resistance to the zombie virus is less. The wave of attacks spreads from the border of the zombies to spread fast. The birds eat the corpses. The carnivores eat the remaining leftover meat of zombie on the ground. These pieces of meat are infected with the virus. Then they spread to more places, creating a difficult problem of control. A few zombies walk under the ocean. From advancing to Country J, they scatter everywhere. North K is a small country, quickly falling, the wave of zombies from advancing across the border of Korea. Korea will be renamed Country H to avoid confusion. The soldiers E and H continuously stop, but they cannot. Still a small group of zombies enter, infecting the cities near the border. A, North K, H and half of Country C were frantically spreading the disease. The other countries had already received the news and were already working. They quickly closed their borders and built containment lines, but they still couldn't stop the birds flying in the sky from constantly moving, spreading the virus everywhere. Although they had stopped the zombie waves from coming, they couldn't stop the birds. The countries near the border were gradually spreading the infection. Only the countries further away that weren't close to the borders of these countries had not yet been infected, and they were also ready to build containment lines. Country J also received the news and quickly closed its borders, preventing people from migrating or returning from other countries. Flights, air routes, and ships were all stopped. The zombies that travel across the ocean will arrive at Country J after a long time, but that time is still very far away. It will take several years for them to arrive, step on the islands of J, and then enter the mainland. Before reaching Country J, they move under the ocean. Most of them are eaten by sharks. Scavenger fish collect and eat pieces of zombie flesh. Many zombies have been destroyed on their journey to conquer the ocean to reach Country J. The disruption of trade goods has led to severe economic damage in countries affected by the zombie virus. As news of the outbreak spreads among the uninfected population, many people flee to areas that have not been infected. They move farther south, away from the danger. Among those fleeing, there are also individuals who are already infected but are unaware of it, and they travel with the crowd. The governments of those countries have set up checkpoints to prevent further spread. They shot dead the people who tried to cross, but the human wave still rushed forward, breaking the blockade. The soldiers could not shoot all the living people because there were too many. The line of defense was broken, and people rushed past over. After 12 hours, those infected began to transform, rushing over to bite those who were not infected, creating even more chaos. When they discovered that someone was infected, the whole group panicked, rushing to run away in a chaotic manner like a swarm of ants. In the military barracks, some people also began to transform, rushing to bite each other, creating a scene of panic similar. Return in the ancient martial arts fantasy, the protagonist Young-woo in the body of Fogi in another world. Each day remains the same, with Fogi diligently practicing. She has advanced to the 4th level of swordsmanship, significantly increasing his power, and his degree of origin skill has also improved after a few days. As the number of people in the temple grows, Master Fo Hien has decided to build a new suites near the main temple. Due to the increased number of people and the insufficient funds from incense offerings, Fogi's younger sisters must descend the mountain with Man Quan and Tuesday Man, Tue Mei, to undertake various guild missions to earn extra money. Guild commerce missions offer higher rewards compared to other tasks, as they are akin to high-paying mercenary work. Herbal medicine, which takes 3 months to grow, does not provide substantial income, so opting for guild commerce missions is the best plan for the temple. Junior sister Man Quan, while earning money through missions, also guides other disciples in practice to enhance their skills. This role reinforces her sense of place in Master's heart. Man Quan is at level 60 and has been given the title of Golden Saintess Nun.
She wears a
7 treasure cassock with shimmering golden threads, valued at 100 taels of silver, and a nun's headpiece. This cassock, a reward from the master, is used for formal occasions and rituals. It is said to be made from lotus stem threads, exuding a subtle scent of lotus flowers, making those nearby feel as if they are drifting into a realm of serene beauty and like went into ink wash painting. For daily wear, she prefers a simple outfit made of coarse fabric called a sa robe. This everyday attire is light purple, similar to the clothing worn by other disciples in the temple. Wearing the 7 treasure cassock provides an additional percentage increase in the success rate of performing Buddhist rituals and chanting compared to wearing ordinary clothes. For example, when reaching level 60 and learning the skill, the effectiveness of the Great Compassion Mantra is enhanced more than wearing normal attire. It is said that currently in Central Plains, there are 3 types of cassocks used by monks and nuns: the golden silk cassock, the Mingqing cassock, and the 7 treasure cassock. Each of these enhances the wearer's demeanor and improves the effectiveness of Buddhist skills. Protagonist, Fogi, remains focused on quickly leveling up her skill to return to the real world as soon as possible, despite her diligence and the occasional frustration about her talent. As Fogi advances in high level, the training speed decreases, highlighting her ineptitude and mediocrity. This slow progress leads new junior sisters to doubt Fogi's position as the senior sister. Up until now, the master has still favored Fogi, showing no signs of disdain. However, the junior disciples have begun to gravitate towards senior sister Man Quan, gradually developing a dislike for Fogi. In this world, only those with wealth, power, and talent are admired by others, while the weak, poor, and incompetent are destined to be oppressed and crushed by those in higher positions, should become worms, ants are killed, used as fertilizer. The only benefit that trash can do should become fertilizer. The common thinking of the strong, the cruel. Therefore, this era always has murders and robberies. The life is like grass, not even as good as grass. Fogi paid no mind to the whispers behind her, staying focused solely on her goal, to complete her tasks and return to her old world, indifferent to the gossip. While training, she felt a light sensation, a sign of nearing a breakthrough to level 21. By the end of the day, Fogi had ascended to the 21st level, with her inner strength reaching 330 out of 330. With each advancement in her cultivation, her internal energy increased by 30 points. Meanwhile, in a remote cave, within a hidden chamber, the granddaughter of the old demon crone had grown up, nearing her 18th year. Her own level had advanced to 50, and she felt signs of reaching yet another breakthrough. She swiftly entered the prison chamber, flicked a bean, hitting a pressure point of one of the captives, and proceeded to engage in the sinister practice of a Ein food gong. She began to use her power to smoke the nutrients from the man. She sucked and sucked the man after being in prison for too long. Although he was fed and drunk every day, all the men here were as skinny as hungry ghosts. Every day, the grandmother and granddaughter took turns sucking them. All the nutrients, the essence of nutrients inside the giant caterpillar were sucked like food to cultivate martial arts. That day, she showed signs of being about to level up. She kept smoke without caring that man could take it or not. She smoked until the man went from a hungry ghost to a little thinner. The man breathed his last and left the world. After smoked the man dry, the granddaughter of the female demon meditated and cultivated. After a few minutes, she leveled up to level 51. A look of joy appeared on her face. She then dragged the dry corpse out and threw it off the cliff. In the past 14 years, she had no idea how many people she had sucked dry. The two of them catched and sucked them dry whenever they needed to level up quickly. There were still 9 more people in the prison, so she wasn't too worried. If there was a shortage, she or her grandmother would go together to catch them, strong men, young men, rich kids, whatever, as long as they caught her eye, she would capture them and slowly enjoy them. Men with handsome faces, she would prioritize letting them live, enoi them slowly. While admiring the handsome men and leisurely cultivating her martial arts, she thought to herself, life is truly magnificent. In this era, the concept of vitamins had yet to exist, so demonic sects often relied on the method of draining vital essence to cultivate their sinister arts, just like the martial arts practiced by the grandmother and granddaughter duo. Within the wall, over the span of more than 20 years, the number of missing men steadily increased, leading to the establishment of a substantial bounty for anyone who could uncover clues about their whereabouts. Notices were posted within merchant guilds and at the gates of many strongholds, with the reward reaching as high as 5,000 silver taels, a vast sum. This prize was funded by the wealthy families of the strongholds, yet to this day, no leads had been found. As the years dragged on, rumors began to circulate. The more handsome a man was, the greater the chance he would be kidnapped. Because of this, many good-looking men no longer ventured outside as freely as before. Only the less attractive men dared to walk openly in the streets, but even they did not fare well in the end. When prisoners were scarce, the grandmother and granddaughter, who needed to cultivate, would still prioritize capturing handsome, radiant men. However, if no such options were available, they would take whoever they could find. To them, men were nothing more than food nourishment for their sinister cultivation. Rumors of men being abducted spread far and wide over the years, creating a deep-seated fear among the populace. Many men fled the strongholds, towns, and villages to seek refuge in safer places. As a result, in the strongholds and villages where the two women resided, men were exceedingly rare. The streets were mostly frequented by women or by heroes and martial artists of formidable skill. Although these heroes were said to possess great martial prowess, some were still abducted without anyone noticing. 2 of them selectively targeted men, maintaining a certain level of restraint with Mongol soldiers. They avoided involving officials and soldiers to steer clear of the complications that such authorities might bring. As the number of men in the strongholds, towns, and villages dwindled, they were forced to venture further afield to capture their victims and bring them back to their lair. Their operations became much more cautious than before, despite their formidable martial skills. One day, while out searching for young men to abduct, old women and her granddaughter encountered a young and dashing swordsman. He was clad in a pristine white robe, with a gleaming sword slung over his shoulder. Upon seeing him, the granddaughter of the old evil felt an unexpected surge of excitement. Eagerly, she approached the handsome swordsman and feigned a polite inquiry. She asked, Combatant, where are you headed? If your journey near me, could you escort us, two weak and fragile women, for a short distance? This area is known to be perilous, with fierce beasts and wild creatures. The young swordsman furrowed his brow and replied, Fierce beasts and wild creatures, you say? We are new to this region and are not very familiar with it. I can assist you for a short while, but may I ask where you are heading? As he spoke, the swordsman suddenly felt lightheaded and collapsed, rendered unconscious by the drug anesthesia floats in the air. Once the swordsman had fallen, the granddaughter hurriedly. She wanted to quickly enjoy the taste of the handsome swordsman, even though she was in the middle of the forest with the eyes of all the animals and birds. Although the old lady was old, a young and handsome man would still stimulate her desire. She restrained herself and gave it to her granddaughter. The granddaughter quickly carried out her intention. The old woman sat beside her granddaughter, her eyes closed in meditation while her ears were attuned to every sound from all directions. At a distance, the faint sound of footsteps reached her ears. She opened her eyes, stood up, and moved towards the source of the noise. There, she encountered the young female swordsman. The girl was advancing when the old woman intercepted her, immediately launching an attack upon seeing the young woman approach. Despite only 2 exchanges, the young girl could sense the formidable strength of the old woman. Her armor shattered under the force of the attack. Lying on the ground with her head propped up, the young girl inquired, Elder, we have no enmity between us. Why you assault and attack me? The old woman replied, You ignorant child, daring to intrude upon my domain and disrupt my plans. She then struck with a sudden, unleashed a powerful palm strike. The young sister of the white-robed swordsman, already severely injured, could not evade the full brunt of the attack. She lay there, grievously wounded and gasping for breath in few seconds, on the brink of death. After a few breaths, the girl stopped breathing. The old lady came over, searched on girl's body, then left, leaving girl's body for the beasts to devour. After practicing, she pulled up the man's pants, then pressed his acupoints, tied him up with rope, covered him with sackcloth, put him on the donkey cart, and returned to the cave with her. In villages and towns of levels 1 and 2, where the 2 old women and her granddaughter swept through, men disappeared clearly, leaving behind only women and a few Mongol soldiers. Some practitioners of dark arts, specializing in using women for their sinister practices, also secretly abducted a few individuals. No one was aware of these covert actions. Returning to the current state of Fogi, she had spent quite a significant part of her life in this world. Despite her long stay, she had yet to receive any word from the angel. Fogi was eager to know the true state of the real world. Occasionally, under the full moon, Fogi would pray to God and beseech the angel to respond. She waited and waited, but no reply ever came. She continued to endure and persist, training diligently in hopes that one day she would return and live with her family. Back in the real world, after the border defenses linked to North K were breached, the wave of zombies gradually swept across. The South Korean government announced evacuation orders to its citizens and set up checkpoints to fend off the zombies, operating around the clock. The number of zombies flooding over was too much. The more gunshots, more zombies' attention, creating a tidal wave that rushed into the country. Bordering the border was the area where the hospital where Youngwoo was staying was located. The hospital had a self-sufficient electrical system. As the zombie wave surged, the military couldn't hold back the onslaught. The residents of the border area were forced to follow the military's lead and evacuate to the south. The Youngwoo family faced a difficult dilemma. They had to leave without Youngwoo. He was currently in a vegetative state, connected to life support machines. After much deliberation, they locked the room, barricaded the door with furniture, and left with the rest of the evacuees. The hospital systems continued to operate, despite no one stay behind. The mass of evacuees moving south created a chaotic traffic situation, causing severe congestion. Vehicles were abandoned as people carried only essential items and left. Those with bicycles joined in the exodus. Originally a wealthy nation where everyone drove cars and bicycles were rare, but when the streets were blocked, masses of citizens abandoned their cars and fled south on foot, following the soldiers. The troops, constantly losing ground, retreated south, leaving the city behind. They kept falling back, ammunition was running out, they had to use homemade weapons, cold weapons were almost non-existent. When the ammunition ran out, hot weapons became useless. They could only become hard iron bars used to beat the zombies, but such weapons became heavy, almost unflexible, while the zombies were faster. When the first small wave of zombies approached, they were unaware and didn't respond in time to stop it, leading to the larger wave that caused the chaos to see today. Adding to the disaster, migrating birds scattered virus-laden droppings, and many citizens unknowingly consumed contaminated food and fruit. This led to widespread infection, and the city fell from within. Other cities and nations faced similar situations. Gradually, people grew suspicious of the infected food and began testing. Through elimination methods, they discovered viral cells with a strange structure in fresh produce and found ways to kill this strain of the virus. However, those already infected couldn't be cured. National agencies communicated the discovery of the virus in food supplies, and over time, stricter control measures were implemented to prevent further infections. Still, it was too late. More than half the world's population had already been infected, and nearly every country was on high alert. Only island nations, separated by seas, remained untouched by the zombie waves. It seemed the infected birds had yet to reach these regions, giving them a rare chance for peace. But neighboring nations, sharing borders with infected lands, suffered despite establishing high-powered quarantine checkpoints and sealing their borders with heavy firepower. The citizens of many nations, though not yet infected, they were gripped though these countries remained safe. Their citizens were not in a state of chaos, much like those in infected regions. The more the armies of the countries that were swept by the zombies, the more fiercely they attacked with guns, the louder the noise, more zombies attracted, just like that the zombies carrying the virus poured in, rolling in waves, from one country to another, just like a swarm of locusts bombing, breaking down all humanoid defensive walls despite their strong firepower. Those who couldn't evacuate in time were trapped in high-rise buildings. By the time they realized the severity of the situation, it was too late. Zombies had already surrounded the city, spreading to nearly every area. By terror, when they heard about the zombie virus outbreak. Constantly living in fear, they were always prepared for an emergency evacuation at the slightest news from their governments. Some, driven by anxiety, quickly fled to more remote areas, while others attempted to seek refuge in other countries. However, these nations had already set up barriers, preventing anyone from advancing even the slightest bit. Though these countries remained safe, their citizens were not in a state of chaos, much like those in infected regions. The more the armies of the countries that were swept by the zombies, the more fiercely they attacked with guns, the louder the noise, more zombies attracted, just like that the zombies carrying the virus poured in, rolling in waves, from one country to another, just like a swarm of locusts bombing, breaking down all humanoid defensive walls despite their strong firepower. Those who couldn't evacuate in time were trapped in high-rise buildings. By the time they realized the severity of the situation, it was too late. Zombies had already surrounded the city, spreading to nearly every area. Wherever they looked, the undead were present. The fortunate high-rise buildings, with doors securely locked or barricades blocking the entrance, remained safe despite the agility of the zombies. However, how many such buildings were there? In most high-rises across the nation, zombies were already present. Only the buildings where no one had left were tightly secured, with fortified defenses inside. Power and water were automated in these buildings, but the biggest issue for those who stayed behind was the food supply. Their provisions were limited, only enough to last for about 2 weeks, with some managing to stretch it a little longer. Modern people weren't accustomed to stockpiling essential goods. They typically bought just enough for the month and would go down to the local supermarket or convenience store when they ran out. As a result, their food reserves were meager. These survivors could only risk venturing into other nearby apartments and homes to scavenge for food. But fearing infection, they avoided direct encounters with the swift zombies, preferring to lock their doors tightly and barricade themselves within. The zombies continued to pour in from the borders, relentless and never-ending. The denser the population, the more zombies there were, as the infections spread like wildfire. All around the world, when nations received the crucial information about the virus in food and learned that it could be destroyed simply through high heat or standard disinfection methods, the food supply became safe again. Infections from contaminated food ceased entirely. But the real challenge was the zombie tide, an unstoppable flood that couldn't be held back. In just half a year, the entire planet had fallen to the zombies. Only ocean-locked nations like Country J remained safe. With the fall of the mainland, many world leaders took refuge underground, while others fled to island nations like J, seeking temporary shelter. This caused a population strain on these remaining safe havens. It's estimated that the global population has dwindled to just 20 to 30% of its former size. The losses are staggering. Water and electrical systems were now fully automated, all managed by machines. Yet, in these fallen nations, the streets and alleyways are now filled with nothing but the slow, shuffling movements of the undead. The water systems in many countries are also automated, but they require regular maintenance, changing filters and cleaning to prevent contamination. Still, the distribution remains automatic. Those trapped inside weren't worried about these automated systems. Their greatest concern was food. They couldn't survive for long without it. Some families decided to venture out to supermarkets in search of supplies for themselves and their loved ones. They had managed to hold out for over a month, but with their reserves depleted, they had no choice but to act. When the zombies first turned, they had abundant strength and energy, moving as fast as normal humans. But after a month, they began to slow down, now moving in packs. Even in narrow alleys, there were at least a few wandering around. They would respond to any sound and move toward it. Since the day the survivors fled to the seas, the zombie horde began to disperse, spreading everywhere. In a 15-story high-rise building within an infected nation, there was a family on the 10th floor that hadn't evacuated in time. After 2 months of holding out, their food ran out, and they were starving, forcing them to go out and search for provisions. From the 10th floor up, most of the residents were still alive, making up the majority. When the military evacuation took place, they hadn't been able to escape in time, and as the zombie wave poured in, they were forced to defend themselves inside. The residents below the 10th floor managed to escape with the military, though some were caught by zombies during the evacuation, scattered amidst the wave of attacks. The families from the 10th floor and above, realizing the danger and the risk of being overrun, decided to return to their homes. They abandoned the idea of fleeing and fortified themselves inside their apartments, which is why they survived up to this point, even though zombies were already chasing them. They were terrified by how swift the zombies were, despite being dead. They wondered where these creatures were drawing their strength from. The evacuees who scattered during the ambush, how many of them had already turned into zombies? They wondered. If they had stubbornly tried to evacuate with the military, maybe they too would have been infected and become one of those zombies. They thought about it and could only sigh at the grim reality they now faced. At times, they wondered if this was just a game, something unreal. But when they looked at the harsh reality before them, they had no choice but to accept the bitter truth. This wasn't a virtual reality game, it was the grim reality. They were running out of food, starving, their limbs weak, watching zombies roam the streets below. They could even hear their footsteps in the hallways outside. Now, many families in the building were on the verge of starvation. Some had already risked going down to the 9th floor, then the 8th, descending deeper to scavenge for food in the abandoned apartments. Some of these floors had unlocked apartments, left in a rush by their fleeing occupants, and there were already zombies inside. A father and his son, from a higher floor, ventured together down to the 7th floor using the emergency stairwell. They began searching the apartments, opening doors and checking inside, trying to grab whatever had been left behind. It seemed like when many families fled, they hadn't locked their doors, allowing easy access. They rummaged through the rooms, searching for food, managing to find a few bags of wheat, instant noodles, and even some pet food, which they stuffed into their backpacks before continuing their search. When many families evacuated, it seemed they hadn't taken everything with them. In their panic, they grabbed only the most valuable items, leaving behind most of their food. Upon hearing the emergency evacuation order, many families were in a state of extreme panic, gathering up what they could, but only taking a small amount of food with them. They didn't have the time or strength to take everything. The father found a few bags of candy and chocolate bars, quickly stuffing them into his pockets. The two continued to the next apartment, which, like the previous one, was unlocked. They easily entered and began rummaging through it as well. The families on the upper floors also sent people to the lower floors to search for left food. Some encountered zombies. They used sticks and knives to fight. They pushed the zombies down, used sticks to hit the zombies on the head to make them unconscious. They did not think that zombies were walking corpses, could bite people, and spread diseases. These people lived in a time of peace, so killing people was hard to accept. Even though these zombies were no longer human, they just beat the zombies unconscious, preventing them from attacking them. Then they continued searching. Many refused to face the reality, convincing themselves that the zombies were simply infected with some form of rabies, which made them aggressive and prone to biting. They clung to the hope that one day, the government would find a cure, even though they had already seen zombies with hollow stomachs, reduced to mere skeletal frames. Returning to the father and son, once their bags were full, they ate their fill before heading back with backpacks stuffed with foods. Other families were doing the same. They fought off zombies. Some were stuck between pieces of furniture. Others were pinned down, their limbs broken, yet still growling as they desperately tried to reach the living passing by. Those too frightened to leave their homes peered through cracks in their doors, watching the others return with heavy bags and backpacks. They could only stare longingly, just dared to greedily swallow their saliva, too scared to venture out and search for foods. They stayed hidden, not daring to interact with anyone. For many survivors, after days of enduring, the sight of zombies became routine. They no longer feared them, but simply refrained from killing them. Despite gathering food, the supplies from the lower floors were insufficient to feed all the families on the upper floors. With not enough provisions, some had started to grow small plants in hopes of alleviating the food shortage. However, collecting flower pots and soil wasn't nearly enough to sustain the entire building. They could only grow a few short-term vegetables. Ultimately, they had no choice but to go outside the building to search for more. But outside, zombies were scattered everywhere in small groups. In their healthier state, zombies could move swiftly and climb stairs, but once weakened, they only managed to drag themselves slowly. As long as the survivors were fast, they could outrun the sluggish creatures. However, if they were surrounded on all sides by hordes of zombies, escaping would be almost impossible. They felt it was unbearably difficult under such conditions. They truly didn't know what to do, or how they would survive. The same situation was unfolding in many places in numerous cities and countries. They couldn't move forward, nor could they retreat. As this dragged on for another half a year, the number of survivors dwindled. Those who remained grew fewer because they dared to venture outside, searching for food. Many were unable to escape when faced with the overwhelming hordes of zombies. Exhausted and trapped, they had no way out, exhausted then torn apart by a whole horde of zombies. When they grew tired, they truly lacked the strength to fend off the waves of zombies that kept coming. One by one, many turned into the next zombies among the old horde. Returning to Yongwu's family, when they received the evacuation order, they followed the group from the hospital, joining the military camp as they retreated south, eventually reaching the sea and gathering on the islands. These islands became the final defensive line. Once the area was secure and designated by the government, everyone had their tasks, contributing their efforts to protect the last bastion of humanity. As the zombies chased the fleeing masses to the coastline, some continued into the ocean depths, where they were eaten by sea creatures. Others stopped at the shore, unable to move forward. The sound of the crashing waves disoriented them, robbing them of direction, leaving them standing there, motionless and dazed. Some scattered aimlessly in every direction, wandering without purpose. Many countries and cities, once dazzling with beautiful neon lights, now automatically illuminated the streets. Instead of the living, these places were teeming with motionless zombies, standing still, unable to find their next prey. Whenever there was a sound, they would turn their heads in that direction, and if it were a living person, they would immediately pursue. It seemed the zombies only attacked humans. Other animals roaming the streets were completely ignored, almost as if the zombies considered them as fellow creatures, not worth the effort. Many pets, once beloved by their owners, became wild and aimless after losing their families, wandering in hunger. A large number of them ended up eating zombie flesh, causing their bodies to become infected. Their waste spread the virus into drainage systems, contaminating the water. River fish, too, became infected, spreading the virus through water sources. Now, the virus was everywhere, spreading across the earth. One careless mistake, and even the remaining survivors would be transformed. Returning to the other world, in her personal chamber, Fogi continued her training. As she climbed higher in her cultivation, the rate of growth slowed, and another year passed without any progress in her martial skills. In the temple, more female disciples were being joined, with many joining as nuns, learning martial arts, and gaining the ability to protect themselves. With the increase in disciples, the sect expanded, building more rooms for the new nun, which consumed additional funds. Some of these funds were contributed by the new disciples. Upon joining, many disciples became aware of the senior sister Fogi, recognizing her level of cultivation. They began to turn their attention to senior sister Man Quan and other senior sisters. This shift led to a growing sense of disdain towards Fogi, though it was mostly unspoken, evident through their attitudes. Since advancing to the level of Golden Sei Nun, Man Quan was very proud. Other junior sisters were also approaching level 60 and were soon to receive titles and robe from their master. Man Quan had reached level 61. As the cultivation level increased, the speed of progress slowed down, and due to her frequent money-earning missions, her training time was further reduced, leading to slower advancement. However, the sect had earned more money and was better off than before. The reputation of the female monks from Mount Emei began to spread in the martial world, known for their impressive martial skills, strong support abilities, and high strength. Their fame grew, recognized by the merchant guilds. Yet, their influence was still limited to a single stronghold, with only a faint recognition from other sects. Despite this, for many ancient sects, their reputation was insignificant. At level 60, despite being considered a skilled practitioner, the level of internal energy was still quite limited. The energy was often insufficient for continuous high-level cultivation and martial arts performance. The consumption rate was high, and only those with considerable wealth could afford herbal remedy supplements called Hondan, enhancing their cultivation capabilities and advancing more rapidly. Although Man Quan has reached level 61, her internal energy is still quite limited. High-level martial arts skills require a significant amount of internal energy, and given her current situation, she is still at the introductory level of high-level martial arts at level 60. She is financially constrained. Much of the money she and her junior sisters earn is given to the monastery and their master. The remaining money was too little for her to buy herbal medicine to support her training, although the sect has martial arts skills that aid in internal energy recovery. Her auxiliary martial arts skill for internal energy recovery is currently only at the 3rd tier. The recovery rate is modest compared to the high consumption of level 60 skills. Her internal energy is at 2,100 points. She can only use the level 60 skill once, as casting the skill requires 1,000 points of internal energy and then consumes an additional 10 points per second for 10 seconds. Thus, the total consumption is 1,100 points. At level 60, she does not have enough internal energy to use it consecutively. Additionally, this skill has a high failure rate, and its success is rare. It is more of a supportive skill rather than a skill direct offensive or defensive one. After a year, she has only advanced 1 level to level 61. At the village pharmacy, there are pills available that support practitioners or adventurers in rapidly recovering internal energy. A small vial contains 1 tablet, costs 10 silver taels and recovers 100 points of internal energy. A medium costs 50 silver taels and recovers 250 points of internal energy. A large, only available in the stronghold, costs 80 silver taels and recovers 500 points of internal energy. She only has a few silver coins, less than 10 silver taels, which is not enough to buy even a small, let alone a large one. At her high level, the basic small and medium pills are insufficient. The prices are excessively high compared to the rewards from guild missions. The herbs sold by the sect are priced modestly, but when made into pills and sold at exorbitant prices, only the wealthy can afford them. She reflects. The medicinal herb garden in the monastery sells many herbs to the pharmacy, so she knows very well. Fortunately, the sect has a skill to support internal energy recovery. Without it, the cost would be very high, or training progress would be delayed. Slow internal energy recovery affects martial arts progress. She decides to spend time training the basic level internal energy recovery skill. Although it is fundamental, it helps with recovery and at higher levels speeds up internal energy replenishment, reducing the issue of insufficient internal energy when using high-level skills. Man Quan regrets not focusing on improving this skill to a higher level and now has to revert to training this basic skill again. In the martial world, the most valuable item is the pill that rapidly restores internal energy. If one runs out of internal energy during a battle and cannot continue using martial arts skills, the consequences are dire. Thus, pills that quickly restore internal energy are highly valuable, and despite their high cost, one must save money to purchase them for emergencies, even if they are common. Higher-grade pills must be bought in major strongholds and high-level trading guilds, and their prices are extremely high. Even she selling everything of value in temple would not be enough to afford one pill. Why are the prices so exorbitant? She thought. She cannot fully understand because she has only recently ventured into the martial world and has limited experience, she mainly staying in villages and nearby Maun. Later, she learned that the court had raised the prices to limit the number of high-level martial artists from the Central Plains, enforcing strict regulations that no one dared to defy. The increased revenue was deposited into the court's treasury. Without these restorative pills, the training speed of martial arts is slowed down. Some martial sects with unique techniques can support internal energy recovery for themselves, but this is rare. Most sects do not have such capabilities. Long-standing sects like Shaolin and Wudong have developed their own methods for creating restorative pills, but do not sell them like pharmacies or trading guilds. As a result, the strength of these sects remains stable. However, sects that rely on restorative pills for training, when unable to afford them, must rely on traditional recovery methods. Consequently, their strength diminishes, their membership declines, and they gradually fall into decline. When the martial arts sects decline, the imperial court gains a greater opportunity to stabilize its rule and solidify its firmly control over the world. In recent years, the imperial court has devoted some thought to subduing these martial arts factions. Part of this effort involves continuing to expand the nation's borders, annexing other peoples and territories. During this time, the Mongol dynasty was at its peak, continuously launching attacks and capturing many fortresses of neighboring states. They did not want the martial arts forces to cause disturbances or internal unrest, so they took such actions. By subduing the martial artists and raising the prices of various herbal medicine, their strategy has proven to be very effective. According to historical records, in the year 1258, the Mongol army also moved south to attack Dai Viet, ancient Vietnam. You can verify this in historical texts. In those years, the Mongol army was able to lay siege to the fortresses of Dai Viet, but failed due to insufficient numbers. The Mongol court had divided its forces to invade various regions, from the east to the west, and even the south. Although they failed in the south, they succeeded in capturing many territories and expanding their borders elsewhere. The martial arts that Master Fo Hien teaches the disciples are mostly supportive techniques, meant to help others. The only offensive martial art is a sword technique learned upon entering the sect. Even though one's level increases, progress in swordsmanship is slow, as it not only depends on practice, but also on understanding gained through combat. Thus, the disciples must eventually venture into the mortal world to train or take on tasks to earn money for the temple, while also gaining experience in the process. The only sword technique they learn is the beginner sword art, but if mastered, its power is incredible. Combined with internal energy, it becomes even more formidable. Level 60. Disciples can learn a new martial art called Vo Sat, no intention to kill, which allows them to turn anything into a sword, using their killing intent to transform objects into weapons. The martial world is treacherous and full of traps. Those with a weak spirit or martial skills wouldn't dare venture out. Some of the female disciples from the temple are uneasy about going alone, so they often travel in groups to support each other. Today, Man Quan and a few disciples headed to the Tan to take on a task of gathering herbs on Mount Tantan, west of the stronghold. The herbs on Mount Tantan are needed by the guild for making medicinal pills, so they posted the task, which was accepted by the female nuns from Emei Mountain. This job is a simple one with little danger, and the pay is just a few taels of silver, not much. Other missions with higher rewards are also more dangerous, so the nuns do not dare accept them, even though they are titled as Saint Nun. It's known that deep in the caves of Mount Tantan, there are mountain bandits, making the task of exterminating their hideout a dangerous one. Although the herb-gathering mission itself isn't dangerous, the presence of bandits deep in the mountains adds a layer of uncertainty. Man Quan, like every time, felt a bit uneasy when accepting the task. Her swordsmanship was only at the 5th stage. Although its power had increased with the support of her internal energy, she was still afraid, having trained only on the mountain and never fought in real combat. Nevertheless, she was determined to be as careful as possible. She and her 2 junior sisters headed to the west gate and began following the path up Mount Tantan. The mountain was not too different from Emei Mountain, where they resided, peaceful, with cool, refreshing air. The 3 of them continued climbing, following trails and searching for the herbs described in the picture. They scoured the base of the mountain for a long time, without success. Deciding to climb higher, they ventured further. Mount Tantan was vast, and the herbs they sought were rare and difficult to find. After an entire day of searching, they finally found a single herb, placed it in their basket, and continued looking until late evening. After a full day, they had only managed to find 1 herb. The 3 of them took turns resting and keeping watch during the night to guard against danger. The herb-gathering mission offered low pay, and the herbs were hard to find. Man Quan could only sigh and continue trying her best. She thought to herself, making money is really not easy. Back in her room, the main character, Fogi, continued her training. Despite trying her best, she remained stuck in place. Frustrated, she paused her internal energy cultivation and switched to practicing her sword techniques and other supportive skills. As she advanced to higher levels, progress became more difficult. After a while, she decided to head to the herb garden to help with weeding and making fertilizer, assisting her fellow female disciples. Ever since she started helping out in the garden, the others in the temple seemed to tolerate her a little more. Still, they harbored a natural dislike for her, without any specific reason, just dislike for the sake of disliking. However, in this world, there wasn't the same concept of harming someone simply because they were disliked, as it often happened in the modern world. To say it that way would be too simplistic. These women came from humble backgrounds, mostly working as farmers. Being from the lowest class, they didn't have the deep thoughts that merchants or high-ranking officials who managed the people might possess. Fogi had tried so hard, but her body was inherently weak. After so many years of training, she had only reached level 21. She had been in this ancient martial world for 19 years now. This place lacked so much: electric lights, clean and comfortable toilets. By modern standards, toilets were considered luxurious, but here everything was still made of wood. Only the wealthy could afford anything made of brick or blue stone. The temple is poor and run down, Fogi thought to herself, but she didn't know how to make money, nor could she remember how to make cement or marble. She couldn't recall any of that, so she had no choice but to live temporarily in these conditions, waiting for the day she could return home. Although this world lacked the conveniences of modern life, if Fogi could see the real world being overtaken by an ancient virus crisis, she would be utterly horrified. Didn't dare to compare or fantasize. When she has a chance, she grasped it immediately, without questioning what it was or how hard it might be. As long as there was an opportunity, she wouldn't give it up. After her accident, when she faced the risk of losing her dream life and becoming a cripple, she realized that if she hadn't been injured, and an angel had come to tell her about the mission to save humanity, she would probably have refused, thinking, "The fate of humanity is for humans to handle. My small hands have no part in that." Fortunately, she didn't know the reality of what was happening in the real world. Fogi continued to live peacefully in the ancient martial world, spending her days training and taking care of the garden, as if she were a retired person living a leisurely life. On Mount Emei, the air was fresh and cool, and the sunlight was gentle. Fo Hien's temple has taken in 2 new groups of disciples. Though they were adults, they had excellent comprehension of martial arts. The first group had nearly reached level 30, while the second group was advancing from levels 14 to 20. These newer disciples were progressing in their martial arts rapidly. Meanwhile, the first senior disciple, despite being favored for many years, remained stuck at level 20, falling far behind most of the others in the temple. Fo Hien was aware of this, but she hadn't said anything. The later disciples, although they had their thoughts, still made an effort to show respect to their senior disciple. In other sects, someone like Fogi would likely have been scorned and looked down upon, eventually becoming nothing more than a simple servant tasked with sweeping the floors or trash. Fogi was truly fortunate. Fogi knew she was lacking in ability, but she trained hard, not because of how others saw her, since she didn't care much about their opinions. She simply wanted to complete her training and return home. At the same time, she didn't want to betray the love and care that her master had shown her all these years. As Fogi matured, she became more beautiful, even more so than the other disciples, which only made them more envious of her. Although they didn't express it openly, their glances and the tone in their voices betrayed their set. Fogi thought to herself, "Aren't we supposed to be Buddhist nuns, having abandoned the secular world? Why do they still harbor such envy and resentment? Do the Buddhist scriptures we recite every day not reach their hearts or mind?" This was Fogi's perspective, but the truth was that many had joined the temple not out of a true desire to practice Buddhism but to learn martial arts for self-protection. They feared death, and in this era of the strong preying on the weak, they sought security. Most of them came from very humble backgrounds, often the children of farmers. Their starting points were different. They had not entered the temple with a genuine desire to seek enlightenment. In the world of Lang Hu, on the moon, after the angel had purified the minerals, she forged many rings. She infused divine power into each ring, then purified them again, repeating the process multiple times. The rings, made from the essence of moonstone from the world of Lang Hu, began to radiate a golden glow, reflecting the light of the sun and containing latent divine power. The angel's work was done. She prepared to deliver these items to the chosen one, Yongwu, and several others who had been selected. The angel opened a teleportation portal, leaving the world of Lang Hu. After returning to the real world, she once again stood on the moon, absorbing the moon's energy. Once she was fully recharged, the angel created a thin red cloth out of nothing and wrapped the ring, making it look like a gift. She then used her divine power to open a space portal that connected to the world where Yongwu was. The angel threw the red-wrapped gift through the portal, sending it on its way to Fogi. Despite the portal, it would still take a long time for the gift to reach Fogi. Meanwhile, Man Quan and Tuesday Man, having reached high levels, descended the mountain to take on various guild missions, such as selling herbs. They earned a fair amount of money and gained some fame. By splitting into two groups, they were able to complete many tasks. With their efforts, the temple now had some savings and no longer had to rely as much on the incense offerings from the local people. Nami Mountain was indeed quite remote, and it was a strenuous effort for commoners to climb. People didn't have to visit this particular temple to worship Buddha, as there were plenty of other temples in the stronghold. Because of this, the flow of incense offerings to the temple was very limited. This was why Fo Hien's temple had been poor, surviving on the herb and vegetable gardens at the foot of the mountain, tended to by the disciples. When money finally came in, the temple began expanding, adding more rooms, and the path up the mountain was widened so that 2 horse-drawn carriages could pass. The cost of repairing the road and renovating the temple was between 400 and 600 taels. This was a significant amount, and even though the temple had earned some money, it wasn't enough. Only half of the renovations could be completed, with the rest left unfinished until more funds became available. Despite this, the improvements made it easier for pilgrims to reach the temple. As the roads were improved and the temple expanded, more visitors began to arrive, and the flow of incense offerings increased. Most of the visitors were martial artists, curious to see the new sect that had been established. They wanted to know where the headquarters of this nun sect was located, and whether its size posed a threat to other martial artists or sects. When they arrived, blending in with the pilgrims, they quickly concluded that the nuns were nothing more than a disorganized group. A sect with less than 100 members? It's hardly a sect at all, just a ragtag group. Many thought this way before leaving. Although there were a few beautiful nuns, none were so captivating that they would attract much attention. The male martial artists, who had traveled far and wide and seen many stunning women, weren't overly impressed by the bald-headed nuns. They didn't see Fogi because she was still secluded in her room, diligently practicing, rarely venturing outside. Though she was far more beautiful than the others, like a phoenix among mound sparrows, no one could know her beauty if she stayed in her room and never met strangers. No one could desire her, no one at all. Then time passed and another half-year went by. She was now a year older, but her level still remained stagnant, while Tuesday Man had advanced to level 60. Despite often going on missions to earn money for the sect, Tuesday Man's martial skills and inner strength continued to improve. She was also awarded the title of Saint Nun by her master and was given the 7 treasures robe, the most valuable item in the temple, worth 100 taels. A robe worth 100 taels could only be traded for a single fast recovery pill for inner strength. While it wasn't something of immense value, for the poor disciples of the temple, it was an incredibly precious item. The annual income of a farmer was around 50 taels, while laborers earned slightly more, around 60 taels. Workers like attendants in inns and similar jobs made about 52 taels annually. The salaries and incomes of the lower and middle classes were quite similar. These amounts were already considered a decent living in that era. For example, a steamed bun cost only 1 coin, and a bunch of cabbage was 3 coins. The most expensive items were medicinal herbs and fabrics, ranging from 12 to 30 coins. From this, you can see that the average income provided a comfortable life for a normal family. However, for those who wanted a higher standard of living, that income wouldn't be sufficient. For instance, a kilogram of pork was quite expensive, costing around 35 to 45 coins for the best cuts, while the cheapest parts, like offal, were around 10 to 16 coins. While Fogi was meditating in her room, cultivating her inner strength, she suddenly remembered a recipe for making scented soap and candles. This could potentially bring more income to the temple, making its economy more prosperous. With this thought, she immediately set to work and told her master. She went to the main temple hall, where her master was reciting scriptures. She waited until her master finished, meditating and cultivating her inner strength as she waited. Half an hour later, her master completed the chanting. Fogi opened her eyes, stood up, approached her master, and said, "Master, I have a method that could help our temple earn more money. I'd like to discuss it with you." Her master listened, and Fogi explained, "I know how to make scented candles and scented soap, but soap is made from pork fat." Upon hearing about pork fat, her master immediately declined. The only method approved was to make scented candles to sell to pilgrims. In ancient times, candles were used for lighting, but they were costly, so poor families or temples only burned candles during important events. Wealthy families who had children studying must be spent for the expense of candles each month. After dinner, many disciples were informed that they would learn how to make scented candles. That morning, Fogi had gathered fragrant herbs from the mountain, sorting them by type, then boiling them in water. Once the mixture reached a boil, she poured the liquid into bamboo tubes and set them aside. Next, she collected beeswax, or the fruit of the palm tree. Since Mount Nami didn't have many palm trees, the primary ingredient was honeycomb. Once all the materials were ready, after dinner, Fogi began teaching the other disciples how to make scented candles, guiding them step by step through the simple process. She took a bit of honeycomb, placed it in a large pan with water, and heated it until the honeycomb melted. Then, she added a spoonful of pre-prepared floral essence and stirred the mixture. After some time, she scooped the mixture and poured it into small bamboo tubes. On top, she inserted a small piece of cloth tied to a thin wooden stick as a wick for the scented candles. She repeated the process, filling the bamboo tubes. After letting them cool, the scented candles were ready and took shape. She then sliced the bamboo in half, revealing a finished scented candle. The candle emitted a faint fragrance of both floral essence and bamboo. She lit one for everyone to test, and sure enough, the room was filled with the distinct aroma of flowers. After teaching the other disciples this simple method, the younger nuns had learned how to make the candles, providing the temple with a new way to generate income. Additionally, the nuns began raising bees and planting bamboo to have more wax and honey to sell to pilgrims, further increasing the temple's revenue. Since it took time to raise the bees and for them to build hives, it was about 6 months before the first batch of scented candles could be sold near the temple gate, where pilgrims frequently visited. During those 6 months, many disciples cleared additional land to plant more flowers, creating a dedicated area for beekeeping to harvest honey and wax. Gradually, the temple's economy improved. What was once a small but worn-down temple transformed into an imposing stone temple, built from expensive blue stone, more dignified than ever before. The days of poverty and ruin were now behind them. The lives of most of the female disciples had improved significantly. However, they still took the time to carry out merchant guild missions to bring fame to their sect. Typically, monks and nuns who descended from the mountain would rely on the alms from the common folk, but with the sect's newfound wealth, they no longer needed to do so. The method of making scented candles had greatly boosted the sect's economy, but Fogi's martial arts skills remained stagnant. She was nearly 21 years old, only a few months away from her birthday. Meanwhile, the disciples who had joined after her had all surpassed her in martial cultivation by a considerable margin. The highest levels were held by Man Quan, Tuesday Man, and Tuesday Chan, who were at levels 65, 61, 57, 54, 53, and 50, respectively. Many of them had advanced far beyond Fogi. Man Quan was only 5 minor levels away from reaching level 70. Though that wasn't much compared to other experts in the martial world, it was an impressive achievement for such a young and newly established sect. Fo Hien's sect had yet to be officially named, so people simply referred to it as the sect residing on Mount Nami. Over time, it became known as the Nami sect. Elsewhere, in a small forest near the Peach Blossom Daongguin village, there was a pair of siblings. That day, the younger sister had a craving for wild fruits and persuaded her elder brother to go with her into the forest on the mountain to gather some. In Peach Blossom Village, the forest was known for its abundance of edible plants. She wanted to pick some wild jackfruit to bring home and also search for some honey. After finding a wild jackfruit tree, the young girl climbed up to pick the fruit while her elder brother sat on a nearby rock, arranging some of the fruits they had already gathered. He placed the heavier, sturdier fruits at the bottom of the bamboo basket, while more delicate items like herbs were placed on top. The young man was focused on his task when a strange girl walked past. When she saw the young man sitting on the rock, she licked her lips in a peculiar, slightly creepy way, as if she had some perverse intent. After seeing the young man, she was seething. In the midst of desire, she flicked a bean that knocked the man unconscious. Then she approached. While walking, she used a gentle flow of internal energy, her ears listening around to see if there was anyone else. When she was sure there was no one else, she approached, pulled off the pants and loincloth from the man's legs, then performed a depraved act. She slowly smoked it all in. The internal energy blended together. The level increased a little with each smoke. After finishing her smoke, she expanded her hearing in all directions. Being in an unfamiliar forest, she was extremely cautious. After many years of practicing this martial art, she knew it was a martial art of the demonic sect, which was despised by the righteous sects in the martial world. These right sect members would often band together to hunt down and eliminate practitioners of demonic arts. By now, reading this, you probably recognize her, don't you? She's the granddaughter of the old demo mic women. Both grandmother and granddaughter practice demonic arts, and their behavior is incredibly twisted, always using men to nourish themselves by absorbing yang energy and enhancing their yin energy. Not far from there, in the treetops, the young sister of the young man had gathered many forest jackfruits, round and as big as pomegranates, weighing about half a kilogram each, with a soft, delicate fragrance. After picking about 5 large fruits, she was preparing to climb down. She glanced toward her brother's direction, intending to call out, "Look, brother, aren't these forest jackfruits huge?" Then she saw a horrifying, extremely perverted scene. The girl saw a strange girl bowing her head right at the man's sensitive spot and doing something. Because she was so high up and far, the girl couldn't see everything clearly. She squinted her eyes, her mouth tightly shut, not daring to move, trying to observe carefully. Her hands were tightly gripping the tree branch, trying to hold on tight, not daring to move or breathe heavily for fear that the woman had bad intentions. The girl tried to make her presence as small as possible, paying close attention and observing quietly. Even though she tried, her body still trembled slightly because of the stranger's perverted behavior, and behavior she had never witnessed before. The old lady's granddaughter, after smoked this man dry, smiled happily at the corner of her mouth. She licked her lips, then sat up and slowly improved her Yin Food Gong martial arts. After a moment of completion, the girl took out a jade bottle, sprinkled it on the corpse, The corpse quickly turned into a puddle of water along with the clothes, disintegrating and seeping into the ground quickly. Then she left in joy. The man's younger sister trembled, trying to hug the tree trunk tightly. It was not until the sky was dark and the moon was high that the girl dared to crawl down to check. The girl came to a piece of moist ground, only moist ground, and a basket of scattered fruits over the land. Just a moment ago, her young brother was still sitting here. Book number 2 ends here. Please continue reading book number 3 to learn more about Young Woo's journey in the world of Miram. Print book also in Amazon.